Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we welcome back to the show for our, I think, annual show that we do every year, every offseason, Drew Dinsick, NBC Sports Bet, where I give you a bunch of stuff and ask you, hey, would you bet on this, Drew? And to me, you are one of the best analyst follows in the betting universe, and I'm glad to do this. We've had a lot of fun before. I've asked for ridiculous bets. We've tried to figure out and project what's going to happen in the future. Kyler Murray never became a Viking, unfortunately. That would have been an incredible call had that worked out for you once upon a time. But I am thrilled to have you back on the show, Drew Dinsick. What is going on, man?
Nothing bad. I love the NFL offseason almost as much as like the grind of, betting game by game during the regular season, just because it is super fun to sort of try to solve the puzzle of what are these teams going to be? How do you come up with a fair price? And honestly, this is the most fun team to talk about year in, year out. It feels like the Vikings are just constantly, there's something fascinating about their vision of team building and their palace intrigue of what's going on behind the scenes. And I feel like this is as good of it's maybe more of a fact finding learning for me so that I can have the right outlook. But, it's come up a couple times as I've talked about NFL as we've, seen win totals pop and, seen some futures prices pop, and people are kind of, pick your brain on, well, who are you impressed by? Whose offseason really kind of stood out to you? Where, what are some major takeaways so far? And, to this point, I've been pretty impressed by what the Vikings are doing in terms of how they're allocating their resources. And, I try to sort of read between the lines and, just kind of, when a team is investing this aggressively and building around, a rookie quarterback on a, cost control deal, like that's an exciting high upside team in general to try to price. And the NFC North is absolutely stacked now with fun, interesting teams. But considering the way that things have broken for the Vikings for this offseason, to me at least, there's a universe where the road to the NFC goes through Minnesota.
Well, and that's exactly what I want to talk with you about. So I've got a bunch of questions here, and they start with would you bet? And so now that, just in my feeling, we have the Aaron Rodgers conversation behind us, we don't have to have that discussion, because if it was 2 weeks ago, I would have asked you what your difference in a win total might be with Aaron Rodgers or JJ McCarthy. But since now Rodgers is just the guy we don't speak of on the show, let's talk about JJ McCarthy and a win total here and some numbers. Would you bet that JJ McCarthy throws more than 25 touchdowns this year? And this is the most interesting part. You talk about intrigue and why the Vikings will be at the top of the list. If we made 1 through 32 intrigue, I would put them up in the top 5, because find me a roster that has been delivered on a silver platter better to a young quarterback. The only one I could think of, and I did this research for an article, was really San Francisco and Brock Purdy, where they gave him an elite run game, an elite defense, incredible wide receivers, and none of them were mad at the time or injured at the time for an entire season. And oh, by the way, a borderline MVP running back in Christian McCaffrey. I do not think the Vikings are quite as good top to bottom as the 2023 San Francisco 49ers roster, but it ain't that far away. So a lot goes on the shoulders of JJ McCarthy to make the most of this for a first-year starting quarterback. I will not call him essentially a rookie. He was around the team, but a first-year starting quarterback. How is 25? Do you like my number for this?
I do. It's a very, very sharp number. And I think that you have to lean over for a couple of reasons here. And I guess taking a giant step backwards, my thesis for just how do you price young quarterbacks and really just inexperienced quarterbacks. To me, at least, the takeaways are largely about just where are you on your development arc? Have you had an arrested development? Because for the most part, the quarterbacks that flame out and fail, who are perceived top 10 talents, taken in the top 10 as JJ was, they fail when their last year in college was a step backwards, or they get to a professional system and the protection's so bad that they just develop bad habits, or there's no weapons to really rely on, and so they never really develop chemistry with anyone that they're throwing the ball to, and they never kind of reach their ceiling, or a bad coaching staff that just doesn't really know how to develop a guy. And like, other than the injury which impacted JJ last year, none of that comes into play at all for McCarthy this year, because you have a proven, uh, you know, now veteran system of coaches who have, they were able to develop on the fly 2 years ago, as they were trying to struggle to backfill from the Cousins injury. They were able to get Sam Darnold to take a massive step forward last year with the development that they provided, and you have now a top, on paper at least, a top 10 if not top 5 offensive line. You have on paper a top 2 receiving room after Cincinnati, as far as I can tell you. And I think that the pieces are all in place for success here. And McCarthy actually, he did, to me at least in college, fit like the right development arc for a guy who sits his first year. He does not have a ton of experience, which is obviously a huge X factor, because who knows what happens if the game is going too fast for him and he just is. It's just not, you know, he's just not ready. Like, that's certainly a possibility. And I think by the time we get through minicamp, and certainly by the time we get through, the early portion of training camp, there will be signs if this is a bad bet. I think, just the way that they've rostered their backup quarterback situation, and just the fact that all of the other pieces are in place where this should be a successful, outcome, is enough for me to take an over on. And I thought that in college, McCarthy peaking to his national title championship was like that, short of Jaden Daniels, who could not have finished his college career on a more impressive, final chapter before moving on to the NFL. Like, McCarthy was your second best kind of guy in the arc of the process, and the fact that there wasn't a huge kind of strange rookie year where people wanted to see him, and Darnold's not the long term answer. Let's kick the tires on McCarthy. Like, as soon as McCarthy was out of the picture and there was no pressure on Darnold, and the Vikings compiled a handful of wins, like, I think that was the correct chapter in his development to really help unlock things for him to take this next step forward. And O'Connell's system, to me, is a system that you're going to see more passing touchdowns just by default, because of the targets, and when you're inside the 20, the ability to specifically get the ball to Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson, and even more so, should help juice your passing touchdown number. And the fact that they play indoors this year, there's not a lot of bad weather games on the schedule for the Vikings this year. You have potentially a questionable weather game at the Browns. At the Packers is obviously a weird one, and at the Giants and at the Steelers. Those are your only 4 outdoor games that you really have to be concerned about the conditions. So for me, at least, this looks like a decent play on the over, but it's going to come in pretty close to that number probably.
I did not think of that, but they do have more home games than they do road games this year, which US Bank Stadium is actually, the first time we ever talked was for an article where I wrote about, like, does home field advantage still matter? And I believe your answer was, in some places it does. And I think we've really seen that at US Bank Stadium. And I'm still convinced, had the NFL had different rules and the Vikings played their playoff game at home, that I don't know if they would have won, but I think it would have gone differently for Sam Darnold rather than having to go on the road, because he was so comfortable there. And we saw Kirk Cousins put up huge numbers year after year at US Bank Stadium. So you are getting a cheat code from the outset. Your number 1 wide receiver is either number 1 or number 2 in the NFL, depending on who you ask, but that's a great place to start. Your coach has the QB Whisperer title. And hey, who can deny that when you win 14 games with Sam Darnold and have him as a top 10 quarterback? And if I hadn't seen any JJ McCarthy with my own eyes, and I just had to go into this completely blind with no knowledge of what I saw on a daily basis in training camp last year, I would be saying, "Hey, man, I don't know." Like he hasn't thrown a lot of passes, but I think that with that progress he made last year and how impressive it was, his work ethic, his leadership capabilities, that this is where the bar should be set for JJ McCarthy. I don't think we should be talking about it as, well, hey, if he could just sort of game manage. You can't just game manage as the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. And that would be the one thing that, how do you go from when you were in college, you did mostly the game managing and then, hey, go make a great play on third down, to now this is a different setup. Even if they got Jordan Mason, even if they got better run blockers, Kevin O'Connell is going to lead through the quarterback position, and there is going to be a ton of pressure on JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Um, and if again, like if there was a coaching staff that you had any inkling of questions about development, then the kind of the downside tail is maybe more obvious, right? But for me, at least, with sort of the just again like 2 through 53 on this roster, assuming they address the safety position in round one of the draft, like this is a super team on paper. There are so many talented players on both sides of the ball here, and they're talented players at premium positions on both sides of the ball. So it's yeah, to me at least, the blind spot in the market right now is, well, what if he's good? And if that's the answer, then then making their win total, kind of being in control of their own destiny in the NFC North feels real to me.
Okay, so since you brought up the win total, I'll just ask you now. The one that was thrown out there was 8.5. I did an entire show talking about my opinions on that, which I think that there is a bar that is set much higher than that here. And even though there should be some patience for JJ McCarthy, I actually had a long discussion in the airport with Alec Lewis of The Athletic when we were about to head back to Minnesota the other day about where we should actually set the bar for this team. I think if it's not double digit wins with all the investment they made and what you just said about the roster, which I completely agree with, that that would be a pretty huge disappointment. And so it is a lot that comes down to, can JJ McCarthy drive this bus? Because this bus has platinum wheels and golden windows, and like it's a really nice bus. It's like a Ferrari bus to drive. And so I think that when you move on from a Sam Darnold and you do not sign an Aaron Rodgers, like a very win right now quarterback, then your decision, your guy, he has to win right now, and you have to be in that conversation come January.
Yeah, and we as football analysts, I think, get a little hung up on the quarterback position and the value and the importance and all of that. But to me, at least, the Vikings have a couple of paths to double digit wins, right? If JJ McCarthy is good, but to me that unlocks like another 14-win season. That's not they're just eking across the line and getting nine. That is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow of, oh, now we are realistically pursuing a championship on this quarterback's rookie deal type of upside. The median outcome is, like you said, like, hey, we're winning games. He's going to make his mistakes. Maybe it takes him till about midpoint of the season for the game to slow down for him. Guess what you have? Well rostered to deal with that. A defense that can hold your opponents to 17 points. Like, you're not really going to have to ask him to do a whole heck of a lot over the first half of the season to still get wins. Now, is this team going to be potentially like a little bit, just overrated by market in terms of like what the spreads will be? I mean, maybe. Is it going to come down to, just being able to execute around the margins, get a couple of turnovers, get lean on your special teams to make their field goals, like, or are you going to, kind of find fledgling success and score into the low 20s while you're keeping your opponents in the 17s is going to kind of determine one way or the other if they're a bet on week in, week out. But I still think that in general, this is not a especially scary schedule outside of your NFC North head to heads. In general, I think the fact that the other NFC North teams, in particular your Lions, have taken a massive step backwards with that coaching system dissolving with both coordinators getting head coaching jobs and taking other pieces with them is being a little undercovered and underreported, or at least under considered. And I think the Vikings, again, like this to me on paper, even with a couple of injuries to key players, there's depth and there's frontline talent and there's depth across this defense. And I think what Brian Flores did last year with the pieces that they put in place was extremely impressive. And I would expect that at least the same level of performance, if not a step forward from the unit with the investments they made in Rodgers, Hargrave, and Allen.
So here is a hold up for me, a little bit of a hold up,
Sure.
is the schedule. Now we mentioned that they get a lot of home games, but some of those home games are against like Lamar Jackson. They do have a pretty tough, and I know opposing schedule is something that I've sort of made fun of through the years. Of like, come on, guys, we don't know an opposing schedule strength. However, when the opposing teams have Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, I think I could say that's going to be pretty tough. And then the division as well. That would be my one holdup. Now, not for 8.5. To me, if it goes below 8.5, that something went really wrong for your team. That's a quarterback injury. That even with a quarterback injury, I would still say this roster should at least win 9 games. But as far as just the schedule goes, how much does that play into your evaluation of what they can be?
Well, you're correct in that the opponents, even the venue is favorable for your toughest opponents. Eagles, Commanders, Ravens were those were among the best teams in football last year, but they're all coming to you. Bengals, is one of the better quarterbacks in football. He's coming to you, right? Like that is probably where things are on the positive side. And then the question marks and the negative. There's not a lot of easy wins, but there are not a lot of easy wins in football nowadays. Period, unless you're existing in the AFC, NFC South. And in general the matchups against the teams that you know would cause you concern. I think you've done a good job, at least, of putting together a roster that directly combats the tougher parts of this schedule. So sequencing will be fascinating to see once we know exactly what order they play in. And like when and where do you draw the Browns will be a fun one, right? Like, is that early in the season before the weather gets terrible? Like that's or is that early in the season before JJ is comfortable with a violent pass rush, right? Like is Darisaw 100% healthy to start the season going up against Miles Garrett? Like like that's going to be fascinating sequence wise, because otherwise the Browns looks like a nice soft spot. I'm not especially high on the likes of the Cowboys and certainly not the Falcons and the Giants and the Steelers and the Seahawks. Those look like you're going to be solid favorites, even though 3 of those 4 are on the road. So it's really kind of a matter of how do you match up against the elite quarterbacks on your schedule, which include Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Hurts, and Daniels, and then the everybody else, to me at least, has enough questions about what's going on with either the franchise as far as their arc, or the quarterback, or soft spots on the defense still that you can prey on. So I think the elite quarterbacks are going to be the fun tests that sort of prove whether this Vikings team is, what to expect out of them in the playoffs if they get there. But as far as an 8.5, win total, I think you're getting a depressed number just because of the names on the schedule.
All right, let me transition into a different topic, which is the draft. Now, the Vikings do not have sexy picks. They are not the ones that are leading any of the headlines on NFL Network or ESPN draft shows with the 24th overall selection. Would you bet that the Vikings stick and pick at 24th overall? Or do you think that we'll be wasting our time on the first night
Mm.
of the draft and setting up for day 2 after a trade down? Which way would you bet that?
Yeah, it's trading down with the Lions, right? No, I think in seriousness, a pick and stick or a trade, just a small slide down, wouldn't surprise me. But I also say, like, the way that the landscape is from a macro standpoint in the draft is people think 15 to 40, not a huge delta, right? A lot of positional depth there across kind of key key weak points in the league in terms of talent. So you have a lot to choose from to sort of populate the part of your roster you want to address in that range. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a soft trade market for the first round once we get out of, say, the top 10, maybe the top 15. And it may be a pretty quiet, like, there's just not enough. You're not getting enough to slide down a few spots to make it worth their while. So they may stay ultimately and take that pick at 24. As I look at their roster, it's been very obvious free agency. The name of the game was address the trenches, which to me means that addressing the trenches would be unlikely. And when you kind of look at, well, what would make sense then? Certainly secondary. There's not a lot of elite cornerbacks that you could potentially start and play on day one with this group, but there are some absolute outstanding athletes at safety, and it's tough to find fits for the elite safeties. And so I kind of am right now in the mindset that they are set up pretty perfectly to potentially take the best safety in the class and have him either available as the kind of heir apparent to Harrison Smith, or be a guy that you can kind of slide into the mix to be part of your starting five in your secondary on day one. So that would be my general guess. If they surprise and take a shot at someone on the offensive side of the ball, my guess is it would be some interior offensive lineman just to backstop because you bring in two nice pieces with Kelly and particularly Will Freeze, but the depth there may be something that they're a little bit conscientious of.
Oh, it's pronounced fries as an offensive
Fries.
lineman. Isn't that great?
Fries.
Isn't that great? I had to check with multiple people. I'm like, "Is this as great as I think it is?"
Fries.
Fries, and they're like, "Yeah, it is." Like, that's
Will
awesome. I mean, if
Fries.
you're a lineman, you can't be Will Freeze. You got to be Will Fries. Let's go. Uh, so I think safety is a great pick for the Vikings at 24 because if Malachi Starks, they also might like Nick Emenware.
Yeah.
Those two guys in particular stand way out. And I think there's draft philosophy is so interesting to try to pin down because somebody mentioned to me at the owners' meetings, like, yeah, everybody loves the trade down. The analytics people love the trade down. However, if there is a top 15 talent on their board, not on Mel Kiper's board or whoever else's board on the outside, but their board that drops to 24, which what are the odds? The odds are decent that that happens. Then they're just going to take that player because I think what we've realized about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is just because the outside analytics people think a certain way analytically about drafting or team building or whatever doesn't mean that he as an analytics central person just agrees with all of it. Like all analytics people aren't just the same nerd, right? Like this could be a different nerd. And I think what we saw from last year when everyone was shocked by the trade up to get Dallas Turner, I asked him about that on this podcast. He came on and he said, like, a lot of times in sports and in basketball is a good example. It's like your best players are the ones that are driving your success. And you can find other players. You can find a fill in corner like Isaiah Rodgers in free agency and feel pretty good about that guy. You cannot find Justin Jefferson outside the first round. It just doesn't happen. And so Jefferson would also be an example, or Christian Darrisaw, of top 15 talent, slid down the board for whatever reason. The Vikings grab them, they turn into superstars. You're looking for the same thing. I think Malachi Starks is a great potential pick for them. He kind of has some early Harrison Smith vibe to him as like an all-around football player. The one position on offense would be left guard.
Mhm.
And I also think, just philosophically, the back end of the first round is a great place to get the non-premium position, but get the best player. So
Yep.
you might take the best guard in the entire draft, whether it's Booker or whether it's Gray Zabel, who's projecting as a guard. And they have to consider that as well, because you mentioned, hey, they could have a top 5 line. What if it's even better? Like, right? I mean, if you're Kevin O'Connell, you just got to be like, anything to
Sure.
help JJ McCarthy is a good thing.
I like the Gray Zabel shout. Would expect he'll be available and would be fascinating to see him as a potential, kind of a good culture fit, plug and play kind of a guy if they need him, and or just a guy that can help provide some depth and step into a role in the future. But yeah, the they are there are a handful of teams that are kind of in that range of 20 to 28, I would say, who have pretty clear, kind of clear. They've given themselves sort of the perfect opportunity to plug holes with elite talent in that range, which looks pretty. And the Vikings are the most obvious of those, in my opinion.
So give me your like your big three. Like for positions, if they were gonna stick and pick, what's your top three that you would bet on?
Yeah, safety, interior O line, and tackle.
Tackle? Think
There's some
so?
good. There's some really good tackles that are
Oh,
going
to
to be
move
available
to
there.
maybe to move to guard though, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay. Oh,
yeah,
I see
yeah,
what you mean. Okay, well,
yeah.
that still counts.
Just a
To me,
guy that
that's
can either be
cheating.
a swing, guy that can be a swing, or yeah, or a guard. Yeah.
Okay, that's cheating. That's both guard. That's also guard.
Okay, well,
Uh,
if it's going to be somebody completely off the radar or a surprise, then to me at least, yeah, there's some cornerbacks who could be available in that range, like a Baron or someone along those lines who might be a nice nickel for you.
I like you picking our audience who is obsessed with guards, and they should be. Will appreciate you going guard as your numbers two and three. I think I would also say corner is the number three. Defensive tackle is the wild card because the two guys they got are short term options for them as opposed to longer term. And
Right.
what you know as well as I do about defensive tackles is they don't hit the free agent market if they're great. Their teams extend them to huge contracts. They're hard to go find, as you could see by how much money they had to spend on these two guys who are both on the other side of their primes. Let's just continue with the draft a little bit here.
Sure.
Random draft bets. I want to hear from you. Well, first I want to hear about the Shadur Sanders thing because this is like all over the place what people think about him. But also give me some stuff that's just on your mind randomly with interesting bets you might make on the draft.
um, the drama feels a little light this year. Kind of
Does.
looks like we kind of know what's going to happen, and so it's going to be tough not to get overconfident and just fire into huge negative numbers and then get surprised when things don't quite break your way. But the 1.01 of Cam Ward to Tennessee now just feels done. I don't think that there's really much. There's not really any getting too cute crystal balling like, well, what if they're just doing all this for this reason? That's to me at least, either the offers that they were going to get to come up were not good enough, or they themselves have just decided that they are they have the next Pat Mahomes on their hands, or for whatever reason. I don't see it, but good luck to them. The So Cam Ward going one to the Titans looks like a done deal. The Browns are a little bit of an enigma, but I do not think that they are in the Shador Sanders ball game at all. In fact, gird your loins for a week one at Cleveland, where you're taking on your old friend Kirk Cousins and the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. But that, to me at least, enough whispers of that is going to happen. I've heard from enough random places that I think that's just going to happen. So Shador Sanders would be a very surprising choice at second for them, and I think they're more like a day two, day three project at quarterback kind of a team at this point. So let's say they take best player available on their board. I've heard from enough teams that are like one with a bullet on Hunter that it wouldn't shock me if they are in that same boat and they've just been very quiet about it. But at the same time, I don't ignore stuff like Schefter going pretty publicly loud with them being a team that's interested in Abdul Carter. So it'll be one of those two. At price, I would take a shot on Hunter because there are some big numbers out there. And to me, at least, when you look at their weak strengths and weaknesses, it's like, why wouldn't you take Hunter exactly? But we'll see ultimately what they do. The Giants are a fun one because I would be actually in the last 6 7 days. It feels like coach and GM throwing up a white flag a little bit, like the tank may be on for 2025, which is sad if you're a Giants fan. But when you're looking at their quarterback situation and what they could get out of this draft, and what they do have as far as available options, doesn't look like winning football to me. And so they're in the Arch Manning tankathon, maybe, which is kind of a sad state of affairs, but it is what it is. Um, as far as where their strengths are on the D line, taking Abdul Carter feels like an extreme um, abundance of riches for not a lot of gain. Whereas Travis Hunter would fit them kind of ideally, I think. So Hunter to the Giants would make the most sense, but if he's gone to the Browns, do they take Abdul Carter or do they find a trade partner? Would be sort of the key question. Let's assume that they just stick and pick Carter, then the Patriots find themselves in a tight spot because they're obviously not taking a quarterback, and the two best non-quarterbacks are gone. They do need help at offensive line, obviously. So whether they take him fourth or whether they trade down and take an offensive lineman is a fun question, but I don't know that you have a trade partner coming up necessarily for anything at four. So let's assume the Patriots pick and stick an offensive lineman there. Don't have a strong read whether it's the Missouri kid or the LSU kid, but it'll be a tackle of some sort. The overwhelming buzz is that the Michigan D tackle Graham is going to the Jags at 5. That's probably maybe the only, after Cam Ward to the Titans, the only high confidence thing I could tell you about betting the draft at this point. And it's just because they have a big teardrop, I think, between Carter, Hunter, and Graham, and then anyone else. And they are almost certainly drafting a defensive player. I found the comments by Raiders GM on Genty somewhat interesting because saying that and then doing something completely different would be fun and interesting. But Spytek, effectively tipping his hand, I guess, a little bit on Genty makes that make more sense that everybody's mocking him there 6. And so I'm not interested in going against huge sentiment that they take a running back 6th. And then I think the Jets take a tackle 7th is almost that's a healthy certainty. And from the buzz that I've heard, they like the Texas kid Banks as their key target there at number 7.
Well, Banks initially before the combine was one of those guys that, as you said, tackles who could move to guard. I was like, ooh, look at this one. And then
Yeah,
he goes to the combine like, okay, just check that off the list. He looks way too
yeah,
good at football for that to happen. And then even for a minute, I had a minute with Will Campbell's tiny little arms, and I was like,
sure.
wait, what if Will Campbell and his tiny little arms made people drop him and the Vikings and then no, his arms are not as tiny as they were made out. When you talk about a lack of drama in a draft, one of the biggest storylines are is his arms 32 and a fourth or 33 and a third? Like this is as boring as it gets. And with Shadur Sanders, I have wondered if after some of the combine stuff, if it's and Jackson Dart, anytime you can tell me what it says historically, because maybe you've looked at it closer than I have. The Vikings have only seriously looked at quarterbacks the draft 1 year, and it was last year. So I know that one, but not necessarily all drafts. I think it's always hard to predict, but a lot of times, if guys aren't ranked at the very, very top, they don't go there. Like, even if some people mock them there, that's the Malik Willis theory, where some people were mocking Willis number 2, but the
Sure.
consensus board had him more like in the later half of the first, which we just don't see a ton of quarterbacks taken in that later half of the first. So I always think if some people are saying he's here, but some people are saying he's way over there, he's more close to be way over there than he is at the very, very top.
I agree. And I would say there's been sort of soft secondary evidence that's back that up. I guess number one, when tastemakers who are evaluating talent are kind of consistently not putting you in the top 10, I'm not sure people with their jobs on the line are necessarily risking them to take you top 10. Number two, the kind of rotating cast of mediocre quarterbacks that we've seen throughout the NFL this free agency is kind of signaling to me that everybody's just going to kick the can down the road a year and hope that some better quarterbacks are available next year. And then the real smoking gun that there's a soft market for Sanders comes from Sanders camp specifically, where coming into the process they were very much we're going to pick our destination, and now their tune is very we'll go anywhere. Like, oh, so you get it. So that pivot to me is pretty telling.
I
Now,
I read it the same way because when Dion I've only vaguely followed this, but, like, I saw something where Dion said he wouldn't be involved in his son's career, and I was like, "Okay, they're
oh,
scared." Yep,
yeah, exactly.
they're
Yeah.
scared because why else it reminded me of when I don't know if you remember this, when Johnny Manziel did it was either an interview where he wrote a letter or something about how I'm the best quarterback. You're gonna regret not taking me and all this stuff. And it's just like, oh, Johnny's hearing that he's not gonna be drafted that high because why else would you be this desperate? Usually the top draft pick is pretty cocky about it. And I think we've kind of seen that a little bit from Cam Ward and so forth. So let me sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, you had guys like Will Levis, even like, no, if you're telling everybody that would listen, he was going to go first overall. I'm like, huh? Okay, good luck, man.
Yeah, that the quarterback is it's always hard. I feel like on the draft analysts, but if they're split, it probably is going the wrong way for that quarterback. Let me just get some NFC North thoughts here
Yeah,
because what a fascinating division to be in. Every team has its reason to talk about how they could win it and be great and have 13 wins, and every team also has a reason to go. But if this happens, they won't. So let's talk about the Chicago Bears first. Would you bet the Bears to win more than 9 National Football League contests?
I would not.
Mm.
Um, and this feels like the I don't know what fifth, sixth year in a row that Bears under was sort of like so there's like a two-game tax on the Bears for some reason. What? I mean, not that they're like going to be bottom feeders. They'll probably improve on their record from last year. Probably. I wouldn't be. I would be surprised if Ben Johnson's a positive culture change ultimately for what they want to do there. But there's still massive issues with this roster, and their attempts to plug holes with free agency I don't say I don't think at least that there was really any move that they made or any player that they brought in who really moved the needle all that much for any of their key and obvious weaknesses. Nice players in Deo Adeyingbo, nice player in Drew Dahlman and Joe Thuney, but these they're paying premium for guys that are just okay. And I think Caleb Williams to me is a longer development fuse than anyone realizes even still. And Ben Johnson may ultimately be able to do something magical, but to me at least, this is more of like a 2026 type of roster with the way that they still have a lot of holes to address. So yeah, count me a little bit cool on the Bears, particularly at that number.
I think so too. And if you're weighing Ben Johnson's potential impact on Caleb Williams, I do think it could be significant. They'll certainly run the ball well. I mean, from you get Dahlman, you get Jonah Jackson, Joe Tooney, like you're going to run the ball pretty well. And maybe they are an Ashton Genty team. I don't know. But is he ready to be the superstar that was promised? I'm not sure you go from getting sacked 68 times
Yeah,
to just being like, great. Now we saw from I hate to reference this guy just because of how it went, but like Deshaun Watson when he first came into the league, he was Mr. Gets sacked every other play. And it took 2 or 3 years to smooth that out. Or even if you're looking at when we talk about raw players, I don't think Caleb was talked about as raw as he truly was coming
sure.
out. It's almost in some ways, it's not exactly the same because he had great college statistics, but like Josh Allen had this same sort of problem of being super erratic when he came in. And I look at Williams as when we saw him the first time, Vikings at Bears, he was terrific. I was like, wow, they're going to have problems for years. The second time we saw him, he was a disaster. Couldn't see the field at all, was getting hit left and right by his own doing. It was like, oh, I guess that's how it's going to be. And I don't think that's something where you just go click and all of a sudden he is a different person, even with a new offensive coordinator. So I like what you're saying about, going on the underside of this. And I really think that it's the Bears' popularity and hype. They always get talked about endlessly. That pushes up their number and the enthusiasm for them. But you look at the defensive side. Okay, you got Jalen Johnson. He's a great corner. And
Yeah.
Khalil Mack didn't come
Yeah.
back, did he?
No. You know how you scheme against the Bears? You throw it away from Jalen Johnson.
Right. Right.
Okay, good job. Mission accomplished. But no, it's gonna. I think you're talking about at a minimum a year of sort of unwinding Caleb to start to build him up. And I don't know that. I don't know exactly why Ben Johnson desperately wanted this job. It seems like he kind of could have had his pick, but this is the one he wanted. Okay, good luck. The if there's like kind of an overall space of quarterbacks and their traits, I don't know that you can finding two that are further apart than Goff and Williams. Just in terms of like what they do well, where their issues are. Like if you are expecting to bring in your kind of your system, your playbook, and implement it with this player, it is going to be growing pains. I would think almost surely.
Right. If you were making a car comparison, like Jared Goff is the AI bot car that you program and it drives and occasionally it just runs over a person, then you didn't want it to do that.
Yeah.
Where Caleb Williams is no brakes, goes 140 miles an hour though, and the power steering doesn't work. So it's just, like you have no
Yeah.
control over that thing whatsoever. And I agree with you that I think it would take probably an entire season of work for him. I still think he will be a really good quarterback. It
Sure.
just takes time, and he probably will never be the quarterback that they hyped him to be. And I also think that just going back, if you were doing full objective analysis, if he had not been the promised number one pick the whole time, and you looked at Daniels and you looked at Drake May, I don't think the best argument was for actually Caleb Williams. And I remember talking a little bit with people about that last year. Just like, I think the best argument is probably for Daniels or Drake May based on what they've actually done in their last season in college. But anyway, that's too much Bears. How about Lions and Packers? Teams that tend to matter, Lions and Packers. If I had to tell you, one of them will miss the postseason,
Yeah.
but I didn't tell you which one. Which one is it? Is that the Lions or the Bears? Or I'm
I
sorry,
think
the Packers. We know the Bears.
yeah, I think it was the one that was desperately trying to get the rules changed so that they could maybe have a home game when they don't win the NFC North, and that's the Detroit Lions. No, between the two of them, more likely to miss is the Packers, just in terms of the strength of the roster. But the team that I'm the more interested in being against relative to market is the Lions. Like people are really still very high on this Lions team, and they may make. I thought I kind of expected like, hey, you get Hutchinson back, they're going to make some nice moves in free agency. They're going to, they're going to actually have a decent-ish draft pick. Like the Lions defense could surprise people next year, but I didn't really like anything that they did in the offseason as far as their free agency moves. And I think losing Aaron Glenn is going to hurt this squad almost certainly. He coached up a lot of positions in the linebacking core and in the secondary, and I'm giving him credit. And who knows if it was him or other players on that staff, but that they got a lot more out of linebacking and safety position than I thought was realistic given the talent there. And if they take a meaningful step backwards with now defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard, who I will put my hand up, I know nothing about, then I won't be surprised because that's just sort of the way these things go. When you have guys who are overperforming and then the coordinator walks out the door, like they tend to come back to earth. So just from like a player rating and skills, still skill evaluation standpoint, the defense, which I think you needed to kind of help step up and backstop any type of backward step for your franchise. It doesn't seem like they made the right moves to make that happen. Offensive line's getting older. Goff to me looks like a candidate for regression in the absence of Ben Johnson calling the plays. My favorite kind of angle of attack there would be probably Goff interceptions leader this year. I'm very interested in seeing where that market opens up because he has a propensity to get a little bit spray charty with the ball when things aren't as well structured, and they're certainly not going to be perfectly well structured from the get go here. So Lions taking a big old step backwards is I think the expectation this year, reasonable expectation. And while the Packers still are probably good enough, probably well coached enough, probably talented enough at the right places to be in the mix for a playoff spot, I would still think that there's some issues with what's going on with this team, and um, with all the data we've got, I think you are not going to get a high confidence answer from anyone who handicaps the NFL on whether or not Jordan Love is any good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about Jordan Love is that when we look at just, and I think about this in terms of the distribution of his performances and how, because they were so perfectly packaged in his first year of bad Jordan Love, good Jordan Love, that we just assume like, oh, bad Jordan Love is fake and good Jordan Love is real because it was packaged so nicely for us. But I remember saying if you had scattered those into 3 good games, 2 bad games, 3 good games, 2 bad games, we would talk totally differently about him as a very erratic player because that was really who he was supposed to be when he was coming out. And I think that's what we saw last year from him is he's just an erratic player. And a lot of it is live or die on whether they catch those deep shots or the other team catches those deep shots down the field. And we saw a lot of that when he played the Vikings these few times. Is the first time they ever played him, the Vikings caught the ball when he threw it deep. The second time they played him, his guys caught the ball when he threw it deep. And I also think, too, that coaches like Matt LaFleur, they like to, early with a quarterback, they like to, okay, we're going to run play actions, we're going to run screens, and we're just going to lay it out for you. But a coach of that talent does not like to keep it that way for all that long, right? They want it to work in progressions of steps. Okay, first I'm going to baby step you, and then you want to become the full, complete quarterback. And Jared Goff never becoming the full, complete quarterback for Sean McVay drove him crazy. And he went and got Matthew Stafford so he could do all the stuff he'd been drawing up in his basement. That's really why he did it, right? He's like, well, Goff can't make this throw, so I'm going to go get Matthew Stafford to make it for me, and that worked with the Super Bowl. But I think you even see some of those limitations with Goff when push comes to shove of why McVay would feel that way. And I think with Love, it's not can he make all those throws, it's can he be the consistent, complete quarterback who can drop back, straight drop back, no play action, no screen, throw intermediate pass accurately after intermediate pass. We have not seen that at all from him, which to me always says you're a 10-17 if that's how it's going to go. And that's kind of what I think of the Packers is that their coach is so good and their defense is pretty talented that they can't, they're not going to be horrible. The guy
Yeah.
won games with Malik Willis, but like I think they're a little bit capped on how great they can be, especially since they do not have a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase on their squad.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and I would point to the Vikings as like we talked about it just a little while ago. If their quarterback is inconsistent, if it takes a little time to get warmed up to get into to the groove, they have a very very talented defense to backstop them. The Packers do not. They are a very meh defensive team, and and the Jordan Love question is like I it is so confounding to try to square like his first half numbers with his second half numbers in games. like wait, like okay, what I know about Matt LaFleur? I think he can put together a pretty good game script. I think he's a pretty good offensive mind. Why in the world is Jordan Love like a Gardner Minshew in the first half and a Josh Allen in the second half? Like the disparity between his EPA, his CPOE is so humongous just from half to half. And a lot of his best performances, a lot of the takeaways where you're just like, wow, top five guy. It's just like, well, they were down in a game against a better team. And then in the second half, when it was like a little bit of backyard ball, he just exploded and he hit the high leverage, not repeatable, not expecting, not really some stuff you can count on. The bombs to Christian Watson, who also himself is not a guy you can count on from a health standpoint, is like okay, well you make those kind of absurd plays like that, and it gives people a higher sense of your floor when we've seen his floor and it is not high. And so I'm definitely buyer beware on Love on the Packers, and I mean LaFleur is a good enough coach that maybe he does get something more out of him, something more consistent out of him this year. Maybe he just changes his system to put more stuff that happens to work with what Love wants to do, like um, I don't know, run back the game plan you had in the wild card game against the Cowboys, right? Like get them comfortable early and then just rip the face off teams. Like that's the if that's what you want to do that. But the Packers are kind of. I mean, all of these teams are fascinating. I guess except the Bears. but yeah, I mean, maybe they're interesting too. Maybe they do surprise. But yeah, like you could tell me this year we're headed for a time and a place after 13 weeks where Jordan Love is being talked about as an MVP candidate. You could tell me that by the end of this year we're literally like, wow, well, what are the Packers going to do for quarterback next year? Because it's not going to be Jordan Love, and I would be equally unsurprised by either outcome.
The funniest thing about Jordan Love is that the comparison for him when you look at it kind of on paper is so far from what you would ever think, but it's kind of Kirk Cousins, where Kirk Cousins, I always said he started the fire and then tried to put the fire out in the second half. So he got them behind 10 points by not getting them ahead early and then had to have the game winning drive or the comeback. And he would rack up a lot of numbers that looked amazing at the end of the game where you're like, wait, 347 and 3 touchdowns? Like that looks really good. Well, why did I not feel like that was really good? Oh, because they were playing from behind in the second half, and then you had to hope that he came through. And the other thing is, too, that both coaches try to mitigate this by running too much. And that's exactly what now O'Connell didn't do that, but that's what Mike Zimmer and Gary
Yeah,
Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski and Clint Kubiak all did was like, what if we just try to run all the time and then limit how much damage he can do to us and then kind of come through later? Like, that's sort of what they were trying to do last year with way too much running from Josh Jacobs on early downs. Now, this has been a tremendous conversation as always, but one thing we've left on the table, Drew,
mm.
is any kind of ridiculousness. We've been rational, we've been normal, and in years past, I feel like I've tried to get you to be silly season. So
Mm.
I'll throw one out there: ridiculous bets that possibly make sense. Now, the use of possibly very liberal. Okay,
Okay,
so that was your Kyler Murray to the Vikings was like maybe. I will actually stay in Kyler Murray's backyard, and I'm
okay.
going to say that the Arizona Cardinals win their division. That's going to be my ridiculous bet that possibly makes sense. I think Matthew Stafford's 100 and is just maybe bound someday to be bad. And because, last year, the playoffs made him against the Vikings, made him look better than I think his season was. And Seattle, pretty mid across the board.
Mhm.
I like their coach. I think he could have learned a little bit from last year. I like some of their low key additions that we didn't make a big deal of. They've got a decent draft pick. I'm gonna say that's my ridiculous bet that possibly makes sense. Is that Arizona takes the step forward in a division that's kind of everybody's average.
Yeah, everybody's average and everybody has weaknesses, and certainly the jury is out on whether the Niners have done too much damage to themselves to be competitive, and whether the young defense for the Rams was real the last year or fake. So yeah, it's I take absolutely no exception to that, and you're going to get a good price on that.
Okay,
Uh,
what do you got? What do you got? You got some ridiculousness. You got some silliness.
let's get even more ridiculous.
Okay, let's go crazy. Let's
Well,
go nuts.
let's just stick with the Vikings.
Oh,
What does it take to get a young man who got consideration last year, got a first place vote last year for Defensive Player of the Year to take down the entire market? And that is Mr. Andrew Van Ginkel,
oh,
who is
I
who
was like,
is.
who got that?
Did you know he got a first place vote
I
for
did not.
DPOY
When
last
you
year?
said I actually
Yeah.
thought you meant Grenard when you said that because Grenard had top 3 in pressures, but Van
Yes.
Ginkel did have 2 pick sixes.
He had 2 picks, he had 2 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, but in general was a guy whose name was just being called in all of the high leverage moments. It felt like whenever the Vikings defense was doing something good. Now it's going to take a lot to run down. This is an award that typically goes to the cream of the crop, and But I think like what's useful to kind of recognize is Van Ginkel moved himself into the conversation last year, right? And he's going to have some similar absurd high leverage stuff happen. But I think he's on an even better defense. And a guy like Pat Surtain wins last year because everybody got to the end of the year and they're like, which defenses are actually good? I guess the Broncos are actually good. It's because of Pat Surtain, so we're going to give it to him, right? Like that's kind of how this unravels for Van Ginkel. But again, like maybe I'm kind of the last one to the fair price party here on what this Vikings defense is going to be this year. But to me, um, this is rostered perfectly for them to be even better and to be the kind of the standout unit. And if things go right on the offensive side of the ball and they're winning 14-ish games and they clearly stand out as the best defense, then I very, very clearly see a universe where AVG is the guy that is the totem, the recipient of the credit for that if he's got the big splash plays.
I mean, if he ends up with like 10 sacks, 3 picks, 4 picks, something like that, y- I mean, maybe, right? Because you'd be talking about him as this freak. And he last year putting his name in that conversation, then everyone started to talk about how many things he does. Like, oh, he
Yeah,
rushes
exactly.
from all over the place and he lines up over here and he's got the long hair and he's really easy to spot out there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's the craziest thing with the improvements on the interior D line, which should make life easier for Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel in a theoretical world. I think if I was going to go, I'm trying to think, what would
Hmm.
I go with ridiculous Vikings bet? I might go, is it, maybe it is not ridiculous enough to say, could a head coach win coach of the year 2 years in a row? The answer is probably
Mm.
not. I don't think it's possible. I think that everyone is always looking for who to give it to the new head coach. That's probably it. I don't think Justin Jefferson is going to ever get to MVP level because they just won't do it. It's always going to be a
Yeah.
quarterback. I don't know if I've got a great one for the
Mm.
Vikings that's really off the board. Hmm.
Off the top of your head, do you remember how many sacks AVG had last year?
11.
11 and a half.
11
Yeah,
and a half.
11
Yeah.
and a half sacks. Crazy. He was an all-pro second team. Like he's already he's in the mind's eye as the credit share guy for what was a very good defense last year that could be a great defense this year. So I don't know.
I like it. I
Grenard,
like it.
Grenard, Grenard's a fun one too. I mean, actually, like the the defense overall, like, and the way they created pressure and the talent that they have available, like it is tough to say that one guy is going to ultimately, get enough counting stats on his own to launch into this conversation. But yeah, I think fewest points allowed
Hmm.
is a market that sometimes pops, and the Vikings would be a fun one there because, again, like you mentioned, they're playing a ton of elite quarterbacks. Like people may be a little bit, kind of looking too hard at schedule for that instead
Hmm.
of just in general trying to price the defense correctly. And and Kevin O'Connell may be in kind of like let's play a little slower. Let's like a little bit of ball control. Not put our rookie or young quarterbacks back against the wall too often, which could help with that as well. So fewest points market as a superlative for the Vikings is going to be pretty fun to price. I think anything in like the 15-1 range would be a fun bet.
Maybe I would throw out there TJ Hawkinson to lead all tight ends in receptions because JJ McCarthy, that's going to be his security blanket to throw underneath. And just one that might seem a little ridiculous, but I think is also possible that coach of the year, Dave Canales in Carolina. That is a pretty mid division. I mean, I like Penix a lot and I love their weapons. So I think that Penix probably should win that division. If they were willing to completely light Kirk Cousins on fire and even just to come out and be like, nah, he's just not even good enough to be our starter. I think it does show confidence in Penix. Not even we're gonna have a competition. Like, no, he's just not our starter. Okay, that's pretty serious. But the way Bryce Young played in the second half of the season, I don't think anyone cared about Carolina. They had the worst defense. You can make an argument forever in terms of yards allowed. And if they just improve that to being okay and they win in 9 or 10 games and they win that division, and Bryce Young's really good, Dave Canales is going to get a ton of attention for Coach of the Year. And a lot of times, it's not the coach that wins the most games in a season. It's the one where they're like, oh, a guy that we just didn't think of before the season.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me. He's your fourth, fifth choice right now, 16 to 1 ish. Some of these other names, I think you can pretty much scratch off immediately. Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen. I think he's a scratch off as well. Even though he has Trevor Lawrence, the Jags, in my opinion, aren't going to make enough of a step forward. Sean Payton's your fourth choice. That's a scratch. Mike Vrabel and the Patriots probably finished second in the AFC
Oh, yeah.
East. If they
Yeah.
win 10 games, which Drake May is good enough to do, then Vrabel should be your favorite.
I like it. All right. Well, we were only mildly ridiculous. I feel like we had at least some rationale,
Well,
but
you want to know what the price is on Andrew Van Ginkel? Let's find it.
now that's
It
going to be
is
ridiculous. Yeah.
100 to 1.
I
So,
mean, okay.
hey, for a guy that got a first place vote last year,
You know,
I've heard crazier things.
$5. Drew Dinsick, Whale Capper on Twitter, one of the great Twitter names of all time. And NBC Sports Bet, one of my favorite people of all time, one of the great mains of any guest I've ever had. And so that's how you keep getting brought back. So we'll definitely do it again at some point. It seems like another great like late June podcast to circle back on what these were and see where we stand. But always appreciate you, man. You're one of my favorite guests to bring on, and we will definitely do it again soon.
Absolutely, and enjoyed the draft cycle, and can't wait to hear how minicamp goes for our young man, JJ
Imagine a world where we can't wait for minicamp. Well, we can't. All right.
McCarthy.
Thanks so much, Drew, and thanks everybody for watching. Football.